For the world you love, your will be done. Let your will be done in me. For you and you alone. Awake my soul, and sing.
Good afternoon. The focus of our discussion today is going to be on authenticity, an incredibly important factor in our being able to truly connect with each other. When you talk about authentic, what you're talking about is something that's genuine, something that's real, and the concept of authentic is very, very important. Let me illustrate. Let's say that somebody in an old church building in Italy finds stuck away in a closet a painting. And they bring that painting out, and the painting gets circulated, and some people look at it and go, we think an expert ought to look at this. An expert looks at it and says, you know what? I think that's a lost Michelangelo painting. A number of other experts are called in. Word begins to leak out that there may be a lost Michelangelo painting found. And these experts all look at that painting and they go, well, the material that it's painted on fits that time. The pigments in the paint seem to match with what they used at that time. The brush strokes and the artwork seem to match the hand of Michelangelo. And they finally come to the conclusion, you have found an authentic Michelangelo painting. That thing goes from being hidden in a closet, stuck back in some old church building, to one of the most valuable paintings in the world. Why? Because it's been declared to be authentic, and that's incredibly important. There's an interesting term in Latin from which we get the word sincere. In Latin, it sounds very similar to that. It literally means without wax. Now, back when, workmen would be, let's say, pouring an image of a cross into a mold, and let's say they're using gold, and they pour it in there, and then they pull the image out of the mold, and there's a little flaw in the cross. They would be tempted to take some gold dust and mix it with some wax and smear it in that flaw and try to gloss it over and hide it. Or they would cut a piece of marble, and they're going to sell this piece of marble, but they look at the piece of marble and they find in that marble a crack, a flaw. Once again, very often they would be tempted to take some marble dust that matched the color of the marble, mix it with some wax, and smear it in that crack and try to hide it and sell it as though it were without flaw. That came to be spoken of as something that was, if you sold it, you promised that this cross or this piece of marble was sincere. It was without wax. It was the genuine article. It hadn't been doctored with or tainted in any way. That's authentic, isn't it? Exactly the same concept and the same idea. That we're being genuine in who we are when we speak of authenticity. Now, there's always been a temptation to kind of be a chameleon. There's always been a temptation to blend in with those around you, because sometimes it just seems easier. And I don't care what era or age you're talking about, I think this has always been something that people have had to wrestle with. The problem with that is the second that you put on a mask and the second that you seek to become something or someone that you're not, you become inauthentic. You become, in a sense, with wax instead of without wax. And it causes all kinds of problems, brothers and sisters. Through the years, I can't think of how many times I've heard somebody say something like this. Well, Dan, you seem at church, but I seem at work. And let me tell you, there's a big difference. Or I'll hear some kids say, yeah, well, Dan, you see her at church, but I see her at school. And once again, let me tell you, there's a big difference between the girl you see at church and the girl we see at school. Now, what's going on? Somebody is being inauthentic. They're playing this chameleon role. They are one person at one place and another person at another place. That causes all kinds of problems. The second that we become inauthentic, the second that we become something that we're not, or seek to act as if we're something that we're not, then automatically think about the issues that it brings up. If a person is living like that, I'm going to find it difficult to trust them because I don't know who I'm dealing with at the time. If they're one person here and they're another person there, it's going to be difficult to build a relationship with that person if there's that kind of inauthenticity there. And on top of that, it's going to cause all kinds of problems and raise all kinds of issues for them, period. Let me illustrate that. Through the years, I've had any of a number when I was teaching in the School of Preaching at Sunset. And then since then, guys call me and they're going on a job interview. Dan, how should I handle myself? What should I say? And I always tell them one thing: be authentic. Be yourself. Be genuine. Don't try to sell the church that you're something that you're not. That's a huge mistake. And when you're looking to get a job, there's a very real temptation to try to present yourself in a way that's really not you. How many people have, they've applied for a job and the employer says, well, you really need to be able to handle a computer. Are you able to handle a computer? Well, oh yeah, I can handle a computer, when they can't. Or, in the case of a minister, well, now listen, we're going to expect you to work a lot with the youth, and this guy knows that he's not very good at that. Oh yeah, that's no problem. Well, then when you're hired and you don't know how to work the computer, or you're hired and your lack of skills working with youth becomes very apparent very quickly, and there's a lot of people very disenchanted, you've got an employer who's been out of shape because you're not delivering on who you said you were and what you promised you could do, and you're embarrassed, humiliated, frustrated because you're not measuring up to what they expected you to be able to do. You have created a mess by being less than forthcoming, by, in a sense, being inauthentic, not genuine, with wax. And so it's very important that we just be who we are. In the first chapter of the Gospel of John, remember, Jesus meets a really interesting guy named Nathaniel. Nathaniel is the one who, when he hears that Jesus comes from Nazareth, says, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? But when Jesus meets him, one of the things he'll say about Nathaniel is, here is an Israelite in whom there is no guile. Now, I think he's paying him a tremendous compliment. And while I have no idea about Nathaniel's personality, except for the fact that probably, he's a pretty straight talker, Jesus, I think, is speaking there in terms of praise. This is a guy who is who he is. He's not out to fool anybody. He's not out to fake anybody out. He's authentic. He's a genuine article. He's without wax. That's the way we need to be. It's when we're authentic with each other, honest with each other, when we pull the mask down and we're just who we are, that we can really begin to relate to each other, develop relationship with each other, trust one another, hold each other accountable, and develop the kinds of relationships that I believe Jesus wants His body to have. And so I would encourage you to seriously think about the importance of being authentic. And as we discuss this idea this afternoon, let's come up with some wonderful ideas and concepts and ways in which we can help and encourage each other to be exactly that. God bless.
In our hearts